sufficient levels of affordable housing in cities with ever-growing populations has been a challenging issue that planners have struggled with for decades, and the solution is something that municipalities are still grappling with today. Housing prices have been on the rise, especially in dense city centers where space is limited and demand is high, and low-income wages have remained stagnant, forcing them to allot a larger percent of their income towards a roof over their heads.
To put this into perspective, the hourly wage needed for renters to afford only a 2-bedroom rental home is almost $14 higher than the national minimum wage of $7.25. This expense is simply not affordable for many households, which results in rising numbers of foreclosures and increasing homelessness populations. A study in the Journal of Public Affairs quantified this and found that for every $100 increase in rent, homelessness increased by 15%.
In order to gain perspective on homelessness here in Atlanta, I spoke with a resident at the Red Shield service on Marietta Street about his experiences with homelessness and how integral the Salvation Army Red Shield services were in getting him out of homelessness, helping him get a job, and helping him secure permanent housing.
And with this program, they allowed me to go to CDL school, and as of right now, I got my CDL Class A license. They are also helping me with a home, and I'm real glad about that because I can add my daughter and grandkids because my daughter is due to have a baby. I'm really excited about that. You know, due to my addiction, I have been in and out of their lives, and right now it's a lot better. It's a whole lot better. I got a chance to be a dad and a grandfather.
That's awesome. Up top.
Yeah.
Up top.
You know, I'm very grateful. I'm humbled to be here, you know, and I'm just ready to embark on this new journey that I'm about to take. Yeah.
The United States currently has a homeless population of over 500,000 people, and the limited scale of housing assistance programs cannot address this issue as it exists currently. Additionally, with the economic challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, more people are struggling to afford their housing costs, and cities are feeling the pressure to do something. For example, the city of Atlanta used the first wave of funds from the COVID-19 relief package to move 800 people off of the streets and into their own apartments. While a step in the right direction, most cities are issuing emergency responses such as these, as opposed to long-term planning solutions.
When looking at responses to homelessness, Seattle, Washington stands out as a city adopting new tactics to address this problem, and their programs even serve as a model for other cities such as Berlin. Mark Dones, the CEO of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, described 2 aspects of Seattle's homelessness intervention plan that make it unique and successful. Firstly, it values housing as a foundation to their approach as opposed to service-intensive approaches that are heavily invested in elsewhere. Secondly, it adopts a regional rather than jurisdictional approach, which allows them to better work in collaboration with organic communities of homeless people by region. A key component of their housing first approach is the introduction of city-permitted tiny house villages in 2017. They currently operate 9 villages with on-site services such as Wi-Fi internet, health resources, communal kitchens, and case management to those who are in the homes.
The villages are able to provide more than 300 people a tiny house structure per night, and the city of Seattle expects to open 830 more permanent homes and enhanced shelter spaces throughout 2021. This undertaking has been accomplished through successful partnerships between governments, nonprofits, businesses, and the community. For example, the newest tiny village called Rosie's Tiny House Village was built on land owned by a local transit company, Sound Transit, who leased the property at no cost for 1 year, renewable up to 3 years, in return for the property eventually being converted into a transit-oriented development.
Rosie's Tiny House Village is funded and run by the Low Income Housing Institute and is made possible in partnership with the Seattle Human Services Development and Finance and Administrative Services. These tiny house villages are not meant to be a permanent solution to homelessness, but instead a bridge to permanent housing.
Each house has electricity, overhead light, insulation, and a heater. Each village has a kitchen, bathroom, and laundry facilities, offices for on-site case managers, ample storage, and a check-in house for security. Through the Low Income Housing Institute's supportive services, tiny house village residents have found success in moving out of homelessness. In fact, in 2020, 53.4% of residents moved out into housing, 47.4% of those people moving into permanent housing, and 6% of those people moving into transitional housing. Unlike developing and building an entirely new emergency shelter, which would take many years for siting, permitting, and construction, creating a tiny house village can be done in less than 6 months and cost between $100,000 and $500,000 on average, a large variable cost being connections of water, sewer, and electricity, which really depends on location. Each village can serve 20 to 70 people on an annual budget of around $60,000 to $500,000, depending on staffing and outreach services. Some villages partner with homeless resident organizations to operate self-managed villages where residents are organized to manage day-to-day operations and employ democratic decision-making. This model reduces overall operating costs. So how does funding and zoning work, you might ask? Well, in constructing tiny houses in Seattle specifically, they are able to build them as an exception to the Seattle Building Code as long as they stay a particular size. The Seattle Building Code states that a building permit is not required for a one-story detached accessory building if they are under 120 square feet. A tiny house is approximately 8 by 12 feet or 96 square feet, and a tiny home can be constructed for under $3,000. However, some villages have required electrical and plumbing inspections and permitting under the typical codes, and others have required SEPA reviews to ensure that the encampment is not a nuisance to the surrounding environment. For villages that partner with churches or religious grounds, a land use permit is not required.
In September of this year, a new program called the Jobs and Housing Program was launched to go a step further from housing and help homeless residents in need of a paycheck find jobs. The program can support up to 400 people and employs homeless in shelters with temporary paying jobs to help clean parks and roadways, which will give them a chance to earn professional references as well as improve the appearance of their community. Tiny villages combined with other comprehensive homelessness initiatives have been a salvation and second chance at life for thousands of people in Washington over the last 5 years. The success of tiny home villages has attracted lots of volunteer organizations and public and private funding, and even previous tiny village residents are helping build new tiny homes.
There are many ways to get involved in the tiny house movement, including volunteering, donations, and spreading knowledge of the movement. A tiny house can be sponsored for just $4,500, lasting up to 20 years and serving 65 people in that time, which is just $70 per person. Homelessness is a dire blight that affects over 500,000 people in the United States every single year, and tiny homes are a significant bridge and cure towards a stable, more safer life for many. After all, one tiny home can have a very big impact on many lives.
Now that I'm seeing my way out of this, I want to give back to the community, so with this tiny home project, I would be an advocate for it.
Yeah, do you think that could be utilized for
Of course.
tiny home villages?
Anything that would help a person off of these streets, because this does not get any softer. You can't fluff up concrete like you could a pillow.